Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 746. I'm Tom Cagley, your host. Today, we discuss the Manifesto for Organizational Agility with Jeff Bubolz and Chad Beier. Jeff and Chad developed the manifesto to help organizations get agile and stay agile. Many organizations rush into agile finding early success that turns sour in a few months or years down the road. The pattern is indisputable. The manifesto seeks to highlight the core issues that lead to this pattern. You'll also, by the way, want to listen to the upcoming interview with Bob Galen. That'll be SPaMCAST 748. You can read the Manifesto for Organizational Agility at Wisconsin Agility. The link is in the show notes. Chad is an organizational agility advisor and external change agent with Wisconsin Agility and Professional Scrum Trainer, PST, with Scrum.org. He promotes organizational agility and positive pressure for change through speaking, advising, coaching, and training. Jeff is a professional Scrum Trainer with Scrum.org, an organizational agility advisor, podcast host, Agile Wire, and speaker. Jeff brings storytelling, a broad array of experience, along with a collaborative approach to teaching and speaking. There's a link in the show notes, by the way, to check out Chad's Agile song, along with all of the other contact information for Chad and Jeff. Are you ready to consider a manifesto for organizational agility? It's time for the conversation. Jeff, Chad, let's start with an easy one. Why? Another manifesto? Why did you two write the Manifesto for Organizational Agility?
To the Agile Manifesto, Origins of Software Development, and then you start experimenting with it and trying it out with a team. And you get pretty far, and you might do some really cool things, but then like most of us in organizational change efforts realize is that you run into all of those organizational impediments. And it isn't the little impediments that hold you back. It's the big, I would say often organizational culture impediments that hold you back. So I think what we kept seeing, right, as external change advisors in the work we do with clients is that you can start using Scrum, you can teach it to a team here and there. Maybe you could teach it to a lot of teams in an organization. But if leadership, if the culture isn't on board or ready for it, you're going to hit that wall. And so I think the reason we came up with a manifesto was to sort of get some energy around this. And I think we grew tired of the agile transformation phrase being overused. So we were like, well, if we had a clean slate, how would we design an organization to be extremely agile? Right? What's the recipe? And I think Jeff, keep me honest here. I think we kind of started from the team out, the individual to the team out. And we can explain that as we get into it. And I think we even at one point had 4, maybe 5 components, and then we added a 6th. And then we felt like it was good. Like, this is ready for prime time. Let's just buy a domain and launch it. So does that sound like...
Yeah, I think, when we talk about it, we always start at the team level. But I think when we came up with it, we started the opposite order. We started, at the organization level, what's our biggest problem? And then we worked our way, like, how do we get this down to the individual level? And so maybe we can just walk through it step by step, and we'll, because it usually makes more sense logically to walk through it from the individual level to the org level.
Okay, let's start and walk through it. So how does that work?
Yeah, so the first topic is skills. And so, like any organization that wants to be responsive and adaptive to change, be able to reconfigure, adapt to any, changing business models, technology, reconfigure people, whatever it might be, they need to have people that have flexible skills, and learn skills. And we think that people are, kind of going back to Daniel Pink's work, like, people want to master things. They want to be really good at them, but they also want to have autonomy in what they're doing. So if we can leverage autonomy and mastery by having flexible and self-selected skills over specialized and assigned skills, we think that will be an advantage for an organization.
And so what you just heard Jeff run through is we chose to sort of rip off the original manifestos, right? Favoring one or valuing one thing over another. We chose a little bit of similar language in that we favor something over another thing, right? It doesn't mean you have to make a complete 180, but you're trying to make that transition.
Oh, come on. Everybody should be specialized. We should have hard lines between people because flexibility allows us to put together production lines. And we all know software is just another factory, right?
Yeah, I mean, we say this all the time to clients. Like, specialty is the enemy of agility. Like, they're the exact opposites, right? Because if you're over specialized, to your point, exactly what you're being sarcastic there about. Like, there's handoffs, there's delay. You can't get anything done. You can only do one little task, and that doesn't provide value. So, what we're saying is we need teams, right? That can, and that kind of gets into our next one, Chad. Actually, I'll let you introduce the next one because that gets into the team.
Well, and I was going to overuse because we love to overuse analogies, and I'll even pick on something besides software that's not as complex, let's say, but still would benefit from some individual agility. Let's say you're a person who wants to do some work on your own house. Well, the more things you can do, electricity, plumbing, right? The more skills you have, the more agile you are in working on your house, right? The minute I run into an issue where it's like, oh yeah, I can't handle that job, I have to call a specialist. And guess what that requires? Dependencies and coordination effort, right? And so that's what we're trying to avoid. So maybe we'll try to throw some analogies and stories in as we go here. But yes, so Jeff kicked it off. The first component, skills, primarily at the individual team level here, okay? Then the next one is teams. So if you have agile people, that's awesome. If you have flexible teams, that's even better. And we're not just talking about the structure of the teams at this point too. So the phrase we use is favor flexible and self-selected teams over specialized and assigned. So actually, is that a typo on our website, Jeff? As I'm looking through this, I wonder if
I think we've also phrased it as favor real teams over loosely aligned groups of individuals.
That's what we're looking for. This is great. We actually found a nice an opportunity to improve our website. We've got it wrong out there. So
what do we mean by that? So like, look, the analogy that I always use, and I think this one's been used a lot in the Agile community, is like many organizations we walk into, they have groups of people working together. They call them teams, but they're more like a golf team where everybody goes out and shoots a round of golf instead of like working together towards a common goal. We say like a real team was more like a basketball team. Everybody dribbles, everybody passes, everybody plays defense. Some people are better at long shots. Some people are better at, the post shot. Some people are better at playing, picking and rolling, whatever the skill set might be inside of the basketball game. But you all are trying to win the game together. And that's not the way, that's a lot of organizations set up teams where they're more work groups than they are actually teams. And so we'd say favor real teams that are working towards common goals, solving real problems for customers, for companies, instead of just people that do a specific skill set.
Now, do you think that's a reflection of, bad organizational design or, just an older organizational design, or a reflection of the kind of work that these conglomerations of people are doing? So if you're doing all sorts of defects, you're an ops team, and I use the word team, and I was trying to avoid that. Stuff is flying in. You've got 500 defects that you have to deal with. Is that going to create a scenario where people are working their own queue and I don't care about the person over there, or is that just bad design?
I think it's a symptom of the org design, and the org design being the hierarchy that you've set up. So I think there is still so much carryover. I mean, this is an age-old Agile topic, but there's so much carryover from the Industrial Revolution management concepts that we still have this idea that, we want to be efficient. And the best way to be efficient is to take the people with certain skills and build them up in that, and then we'll just manage the dependencies and coordination. And you can optimize for that. Sure, you want to be efficient at one thing, one piece of the puzzle, go for it. But if you want to optimize for agility, then you need to think about it differently. And so that's where, again, cross-functional teams is like one of the primary impediments to really effective Scrum or any Agile delivery team. It's if you miss that piece, you're going to lack agility, period, because you have to wait for someone else.
It's probably one of the biggest impediments we run into out there when we're running into different clients. Like it's a fundamental, but it's a fundamental that's missed over and over and over again.
Why don't people wake up and recognize that this is a problem? I mean, again, I see this all the time. It's an issue. It's like playing whack-a-mole. Mm-hmm. You can stomp it out one place and it immediately pops up somewhere else. Is there some basic human nature? Is there some management school that we really need to go and hurt?
We're all a byproduct, not 100%, but significant byproduct of the environment we're in, right? Some of our favorite thought leaders in the Agile community, like Craig Larman, he has his Larman's Laws of Organizational Behavior. I love talking about these. There probably hasn't been a podcast I've ever done where I don't talk about these. But the fifth, it used to be the fourth law because he added one, but the fifth law is culture follows structure. And that says so much. Culture follows structure. So it isn't necessarily that we're all evil inside of organizations and we want this to be. It's just that when you have a large system designed in a certain way, unless you start from scratch, which is hopefully what this manifesto encourages some people to consider, right? Unless you start from scratch, then you're going to have these, whether they're strong incentives, like a financial incentive for managers, or whether it's a subtle incentive, there's an incentive to maintain that status quo. For example, if I am hired into a job, right? I collect a paycheck for my household, and my job is a manager of business analysts. Am I going to all of a sudden go to my employer and propose, I got an idea. What if we don't have me manage all the business analysts and we form all these cross-functional teams? I mean, you might do that, but a lot of times there's just not enough incentive for you to suggest that radical change. So you maintain the status quo. It doesn't mean you're evil. It just means you're doing what you signed up to do. I don't know. So I think the more we can nudge organizations, and Jeff and I are kind of on a mission too, like we kind of have this catchphrase we've been throwing around lately, like get agile and stay agile. Get agile, stay agile. And what we're hoping to do with that, one, we've worked with a few startups and we're hoping we can help startups avoid the trap of growing and scaling and then going right down the path of a big hierarchical bureaucratic organization that is not agile. So
I was going to say one piece of practical advice, if you're in that situation where you know you don't have a cross-functional team and you need it and you really want it, but you can't get it going, just track your dependencies. So we suggest this to teams all the time. Like, okay, you're an API team and you track your dependencies and you find out, guess what? The team that does our UI, like we work with them a lot and we always are handing things off to them and they need us a lot because there's a lot of things that we have to go back and forth on. Hey, maybe we should add that skill set to our team and we should give them one of our people that have our API skills. And maybe we would have to like coordinate less and like we could actually get things a little further along before we need to do all the syncing with this other team. Like just try that once. But the thing that happens the most, your biggest problem, your biggest source of your dependencies. And then once you do that for a while and you remove that, you build those skill sets up in your team, you'll have a new number one to work on. Or maybe it's that database team, then you're always going to them. And then you get that skill set and then you figure out what the next one is. So if you just kind of take them one at a time, you're not going to like get this drastic change, but you're going to make a big change, if you get rid of that most frequent one.
That's actually a fantastic piece of advice. So next is conflict.
Yeah. So the conflict is favoring deliberate action over discouraged and avoided action. So I don't know. We're in Wisconsin here. We like this thing called Midwest Nice. And I think the way we describe it is like the further north you get, closer to Canada, the more you become like Canada, like super, super nice. So like we really struggle with it around here. And so really what we're saying there is like, you have a conflict. Don't wait till the annual review to bring up that conflict, right? Like I have a problem with Chad in a meeting, like we talk about it like right away. Like we are going to have a conversation like, hey, when you said it this way, I think the client maybe didn't take it the right way. what's a better way we could have said that, and we'll have a conversation about that. That's how we work, because we have a very high trust relationship. But there's no reason anyone else can't do that, especially when you have, a mentor-mentee relationship. If you have somebody who's looking for feedback on a team and a team that welcomes that, like, everybody can grow from just a little bit of feedback in the moment. You can't grow from it if it happens weeks to months down the road. You forget the context, and you're going to still remember how you felt as the other person, but you're not going to remember the exact situation, and you're not going to be able to grow from that.
How do you deal with scenarios, especially on teams, where you might have, I'm going to use probably a bad term here, mixed power structures, or people with different levels of power? So let's look at a team, and maybe it is really a team, not just a conglomeration of people, but two of them are from an external vendor. They're working very closely, but if they speak truth, they may violate their green card. They may lose the contract for the business. How do you deal with conflict and build the trust to actually have that on a team that has those kind of components?
I mean, it's tough, right?
Yeah.
Again, you're gonna be, whether those are incentives that are explicit or not, if there's that lack of psychological safety or just safety in general, right? Like, then it's going to be really hard. Hopefully you can have people on your team support that type of vocalization of things that are very vulnerable, right? I don't know, like, as far as like losing someone's visa, that's huge. A visa or green card, like, that's a huge consequence. That's essentially like losing your job, losing your house. So those are big stakes. But at the end of the day, when we do talk about psychological safety, and I know on Jeff's podcast, he's done so many topics on psychological safety, but if you don't have that, then obviously, yes, you are going to optimize for protecting you and your household. Like, we all do that. So hopefully we can get to a place where we're working for an employer, working with an organization where we have that. But if we don't, we can't expect that people are going to put the organization first, right? Like, it's a balance. There is an employment agreement. Like, I think sometimes we forget that. Like, sometimes I think employees want a little bit too much and employers want a little bit too much. And we have to remember, like, we're exchanging money here. Like, you do something for us and we put money in your checking account. So, I support all the movement of making everyone feel safer in the workplace, but it is an employment agreement. So there was never an agreement that I'm aware of where life is risk-free, right? Like, this is the game we're playing. Can we all make it better? I think so. There's endless opportunities for improvement.
I mean, I'll say from personal experience, the best clients that I've had, I've gotten into those sales conversations, and you get to that point where you have a fear of losing the business, but you go through it anyway. Like, there's been some where it's like, well, we want you to come in and train and advise, but this product owner thing, we're just not going to have a product owner. We're going to do this in a committee. We're all making decisions up here, and we'll hand down exactly how they're going to deliver these features. And I'm like, I'm just not willing to be a part of an organization that's not willing to fully invest in this. Like, I don't think you'll be successful. I don't want to waste my time or yours. It's not going to be valuable for you. And you have that hard conversation with them before they're even paying you. And that client is one of my best clients that I've ever had, right? And I was willing to walk away when they weren't willing to take that next step. And I'm like, okay, he must really feel passionate about this. Like, let's trust him. Let's try it. Like, he's putting himself on the line by standing up for this. So I don't know. It's always worked out well for me. I don't know. I go back to Patrick Lencioni's book, Getting Naked is from a consulting standpoint. That's something that I've always followed. And there's like one of the principles inside of there is, don't fear of, losing the business. That's something to get over as a consultant. So I think it can apply in a lot of contexts though.
I agree. You have to have your own principles and ethics and hold to them.
So Jed, we're going to jump into the next one, information flow.
Yeah, information flow. So favor transparent and rapid over protected and slow. I think we've all been part of the organizations where information moves very slow. It's also very protected, right? A lot of times you know something's coming, right? But you don't know what. And then all of a sudden it's announced. And this is kind of, again, the nature of a hierarchical organization, right? And if you were trying to optimize, for example, like your organization to be like the CIA, optimize for protection of information, that'd be a great way to structure the organization, to keep it very compartmentalized, right? Unfortunately, if you want your organization to be very nimble, quick, adaptive, responsive, agile, that's not the best way to structure your organization with regard to information flow. So what we're encouraging is make things as transparent and as rapid as possible. The more information you put in the hands of the people closest to the work, the better it's going to equip them to make amazing decisions on behalf of the organization. And decisions is actually the next component of our manifesto.
Yeah, I guess one quick thing I'll just add on to the information flow before we jump into that is like, if you're a leader out there, whatever you're not telling people you're protecting because you think they're going to react poorly, people are making up stories that are 10 times worse than that in their head. And so like, you're only hurting them. So just everyone like thinks the worst. It can't be that bad. So generally just the truth is much easier. So then that gets into decisions. And so favor decisions by the many over a few. And so what do we mean? Like everybody's making decisions? Not so much. We mean like everybody can make decisions. And we know who has accountability to make decisions based off of values and principles. So like there's this story of Chick-fil-A where they were at this airport and the credit card machine went down and all these people are standing in line and they're trying to get to their flights and they can't collect payment. So what do? They don't just like cancel the orders. The person just like, okay, everyone's free. Like if you can't pay cash, like it's just on the house. And they gave all these dinners away and like came out and was like, yeah, that lives our values. Everything's about customer service here. Like that was the right move. Like that person was just, frontline staff worker, made the decision without any prior approval. Like they had to do it. The lines are backed up. Like they didn't have time to go and get a manager on the phone from somewhere and see if they could do this. Like they just responded. And I think that's a pretty good sign of an organization, that can react to many different things if a lot of people can make decisions.
How long do you think that lasts? Because you hear those kind of apocryphal stories with, if you go back in time to the genesis of FedEx, the guy who rents the helicopter and flies off, the actual FedEx box because nobody can find the key, those sorts of things. And, I'll just grant that those probably, they're great stories that probably happened. But I don't see that happening at FedEx today. So is, one of the earlier statements was, become agile and then stay agile. And I'm paraphrasing that terribly. That seems to be, the distribution or ability of people to make decisions tends to eke away at some point within organizations. Is that size problem?
So I think we're going to close the loop on this when we get to the final components because some of these build on each other, right? So like, yes, if you are a business owner and you scale your organization to 1,000 employees, can you really trust all 1,000 employees to be making all those critical decisions? Well, how critical is every decision they're making, right? We're not talking about making all the decisions by everybody, like Jeff said. We're just saying more decisions by people closer to them, right? There's way too many times in an organization where it takes way too long to make a decision because it has to go up a chain, back down, up again. Then there has to, it can take weeks to months to make simple decisions. And yes, we obviously also want people to take them seriously and have accountability, responsibility, and deal with the consequences of those decisions. If you're just collecting a paycheck, and no matter what you decide, your paycheck still magically arrives, then it might not be structured in the right way. And so the last component is kind of, critical, but definitely a piece to consider if you're serious about your organization being structured in this way. So the last one is ownership, right? So if you're going to empower more people, real empowerment to make all those critical decisions, then we have to consider what is their stake in it, right? If you just ask people, act like an owner of the organization, people can't do that. You can try. I used to try, and I never actually knew exactly what it felt like to be an owner until I was a real owner. And now I know. So yeah, the last one is ownership. Favor shared risk reward over exclusive risk reward. So again, a lot of entrepreneurial stories, you hear about somebody striking it big, right? They have the idea, they execute, they took the risk, and they got the payoff. Not everybody gets the big payoff if they're just an employee in a large organization collecting the paycheck. So how can we structure organizations to give a little bit more of the ownership stake too, so we can share in the risk reward pool?
There is this clip I saw on LinkedIn not too long ago. It was Gary Vee, and he's sitting there talking with some CEO, and he says, like, how do I get everybody to be an owner, have owner mentality like I do? And Gary Vee goes to him, like, they won't. Like, you're the owner, you have all the upside. Like, but what you can do is ask them what they want, and then you can find a way to say, if we hit these outcomes, I can give you that, but I can't unless it makes financial success. So, like, ask your people would be my nudge to all leaders out there. Like, some people want, hey, I just need to be able to I want to coach my son's team. I need to be off by 3:30 or 4 o'clock or something like that. If you can do that for me, like, I will do whatever you need me to do. Like, I'll have all this ownership for this thing. Some people might want an extra week of vacation. Some people might want that money. I don't know. Some people might want something else. But if you ask them, at least you'll know. And then you can set up a guardrails of like what that looks like. I mean, there's so many examples out there of just different ways to do this. I mean, if you're in consulting, it's pretty easy because it's like, well, how many hours did you bill? How much do you cost? Like, what kind of sales did you get? Like, it's pretty easy to have an individual P&L. It's harder to do that on a team, but you can do it for a team or a product. Like, how's the product doing? And at least you're pretty close to that from a product standpoint. If you're aligned around something truly that you sell to a marketplace, like, you know how much money you're bringing in, and you know how much money things cost.
That's why I'm just absolutely gobsmacked that the idea of product is a conversation that makes sense. It would allow alignment around things like ROI. You could have a P&L for a product, but organizations, again, it's back to the way they're organized. They're organized in silos and back to specialties, and they can't see their way out of that. People got promoted because they were good at that, and they are up the ladder. All of these things make a ton of sense. Before we start to wrap, let's go back to the origin story again. And I know, maybe I'm always, maybe I'm a little bit too impressed by origin stories. I assume this didn't just pop out of nowhere. Wholly formed. You did describe adding actual line items to it. How did you decide that you were going to go down the path of building a manifesto?
Jeff, do you remember more details of the story?
I don't know. I think we were doing the first Mad City Agility conference, and it was during COVID, and we're like, we have to think of something like, I don't know. Like, it was like they were coming up with a conference like, what's going to be impactful, like, what is going to help people move forward from an organizational standpoint? What are those roadblocks? And I think it just kind of hit us. Like, it was like, well, we're kind of in the roaring 20s now of agility. Like, it's time for a change. It's time for an update. It hasn't changed for a very long period of time. And so I think that was maybe part of it. And we just wanted to get it down. And I think, I don't know, like, when we started the idea, when Chad and I brainstorm stuff, it just goes back and forth, and we iterate rapidly. And like, before we're done, like, this is pretty good. And then I think we tested it out with some clients, and they're like, well, what about this or that? And so we maybe changed a few words here and there and kept iterating on it. And I think we did the first couple talks, and then we're like, yeah, we should actually build a website for this, and we should put it out there and keep talking about it. So that's my recollection, Chad, of how we kind of came to
I'm staring at a drawing too. That was some of the inspiration. I remember we always keep it in the supporting, like, bonus material whenever we deliver this as a talk. And I'm looking at that. That has quite a few of the components. And then that's also reminding me that, of course, nothing is original, right? Like, I would say we were heavily inspired by Reinventing Organizations, the book by Frederick Laloux. There, some of the other books, like The Decision Maker by Dennis Backey. Like, there's right. The more you read, the less original ideas you have, right? Which is a good thing. You're learning more, you're expanding And after a while, every book you read, there seems to be a little bit of overlap. So I think it was a culmination of a lot of the material that we had read and then the experiences that we had observed as organizational agility advisors. And then it just, then it like doesn't even seem like it was hard. It just kind of pours out of you onto a document, and then you just know it. Like, that's it. So I will say the coolest thing I remember was a client I had shortly after we had created it and kind of announced it. She made it her desktop background at work, which was kind of like, that made me really feel like, cool, this is actually what we wanted. Like, we wanted it to kind of be a catalyst for change. If I'm being honest, everything I do, I just want to be a catalyst for change. I despise the status quo, right? I love rocking the boat and changing things up. And so that was cool to see someone make that their desktop background, so that, when they're looking throughout, like, they'd stare at it throughout the day. They're like, cool, like, I'm going to go to a meeting and I'm going to try to live and breathe something about this manifesto. So I think that was really...
Oh, that's wicked. That's
awesome.
Wicked. So Chad, you wake up tomorrow morning, someone hands you your caffeinated beverage of choice and a magic wand and gives you 2 wishes that you can spend to change the whole idea of agility in organizations. What do you spend those 2 wishes on?
I say too often these days, in addition to culture follows structure, another statement, and I can't remember who I've stolen this from over the years, but the culture we get is the culture we tolerate. So if I could have a wish, I would wish for all of us to have the courage to tolerate less of the things that we know are not productive for agility. I get another wish?
Sure.
Or does Jeff... Wait,
yeah. Y'all can have 4 wishes.
4 wishes?
Yeah, no, you get 2, he gets 2.
I'm going to let Jeff go.
Okay.
Well, maybe we can keep it to 2 for the 2-headed monster we are.
Sure. I think mine would be like, can we just get to a point where we deliver often so we can figure out what to do next, instead of thinking that we're too smart for the marketplace, for whatever context we have it all figured out. So it'd be like, deliver often so we can try to learn faster, something along those lines. So if everybody had the ability to do that, I think it'd be a pretty awesome thing.
Those 2 wishes are both of them are awesome. How would people continue the conversation? How would they find out about the manifesto? How would they find out about you? How would they find out about your new company?
So the manifesto site, if you did want to go directly to it, I believe is orgagilitymanifesto.org. And all that does is redirect to a page on our newly launched website that our company is, wisconsinagility.com. So you can find the manifesto on wisconsinagility.com if you look for it, but otherwise you can use that domain to go directly to it. Anything else, Jeff?
Well, Chad's got, if you like Agile songs and you want to listen to some of those, you can always go to Agile Songs. That's Chad's YouTube channel, where he always has fun there. And you can always find more episodes of me talking to different people on the Agile Wire. So I also have a podcast. So great to, hear that as well.
I will have all of that contact information and those URLs in the show notes. I want to thank you, Chad and Jeff. This is, I remember, and when I first heard about this was that first online conference right after COVID started. So that actually wanted to hear if that was, and that's why I wanted to go back into the origin story. That was for me, not for my bad listeners, all that kind of stuff. But this has been fantastic, and I'm really happy that we finally got to do this. Thank you again, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
In Reread Saturday News, Chapter 19 of Extraordinary Badass Agile Coaching, the journey from beginner to mastery and beyond, is titled setting up a badass Agile coaching community of practice. I have strong opinions about communities of practice. They can be a very valuable tool when done well for supporting movements within an organization. As Mr. Galen points out, a COP is a place for learning and feedback. Done poorly, they are invasive and harmful. Real COPs will get like-minded people together to learn, support each other, interact, and become a community. Link in the show notes to this week's installment of Reread Saturday and a link to buy a copy of the book. In the next Software Process and Measurement Cast, we will continue our exploration of fatalism's impact on change in organizations. If you haven't already done so, listen to the SPaMCAST 745 for our first installment on this theme. Fatalism does not have to be permanent. How the transition away from fatalism can be made varies depending on context. In the next installment in this series, we'll look at a few approaches to tackling this problem. We'll also have a visit from John M. Quigley, yay John, who brings his alpha and omega of product development to the podcast. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?